across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, the last part of Morning Glory, 9:49, Monday, December the 23rd. I'm David Bull. Thanks for your company this morning. In for Mike Graham. Lots of you getting in touch. I've been asking for voice notes as well. Here's one from Kate. Good morning.
Morning, David. Good show. Kate from Leeds. I think Farage should stay well clear of Mandelson. I really do. I just think he needs to focus on his party and the people who are following him, because he will get in the next election. I just think he needs to keep well clear. They're dangerous, the lot of them. Thank you. Bye.
Interesting. There you are. You can see Nigel there with Nick Candy, of course, who's now the treasurer of Reform UK. I wonder how much of this is Nigel actually prodding this and making it into a publicity stunt. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him about it. Keep those messages coming in. Do you think he should, Farage should work with Mandelson, or is that a fool's errand? Is it a booby trap? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. Now, earlier on, I was talking about Keir Starmer and his popularity, and it's dropped to an historic low. It's now at about 6%. It was up at 44%. That is pretty unprecedented. We were saying it's actually lower than when Corbyn was in, so he's had a disastrous time. He now says, by the way, that he's exhausted and he's got to have a Christmas holiday. Many of you are saying you're exhausted of him and you need a holiday from the government. Well, earlier on I was talking to James Matthewson, who's a former Labour Party spokesman, and I was asking about Labour's fortunes and how it's going so far. What do you think Labour has actually done well?
So far in government, I think what they've done is they've turned around the country economically to a different position, a different way of doing things. Ultimately, they've made difficult
downwards
decisions that even I disagree with.
The economy is worse now than it was when Labour took over.
Right now, yeah, we're talking 5.5 months in.
But you just told me they've done a brilliant job with the economy.
About a long-term...
Hang on a minute, you just said what Labour did well was the economy. The economy is going down.
I've said what they've done is they've shifted the economic focus and the way that they do economics, so that in the long run there will be growth stimulated by investment rather than withdrawal.
Hang on a minute, I just don't understand this. When you've got employers saying they're going to lay people off because they cannot afford employers' national insurance, when you've got charities saying Rachel Reeves is taking more of our cash, we can't afford to employ anyone, when you've got SMEs saying I'm shutting up shop, that isn't progress.
No, and that message from the beginning was that this is going to hurt. It's going to be difficult from the outset. But it was either that or it was austerity. And austerity, we saw what austerity did for 14 years. By robbing the public sector and public services of money, the country grinds to a halt. So it was either that or that. It was about taking money from every possible place you can take it from, despite the fact that that pain will be shared across the board by many of us, or targeting the most vulnerable. And they made the decision to protect the most vulnerable. They kept the triple lock there and tax on working people. They've kept those cuts away from welfare of the most vulnerable people, and they've been able to try and spread it out across those with the broadest shoulders. But the economic situation was dire, and they're going to have to turn that around. So in this short kind of time frame that we've seen, 5.5 months, they've managed to make difficult decisions to do that, I believe. But already the things that I've seen with regard to workers' rights, the way that trade unions are now involved in the government directly at the cabinet table, and those relationships, you know, it's a really positive stuff for the long run. It's just going to take time for a lot of these things to come to fruition.
I mean, there seems to be a real dichotomy here between what you're saying and what people are telling me, which is that the money is going on stupid schemes like carbon capture, net zero, things no one ever voted for, foreign aid, for example. Charity begins at home, does it not?
Well, David, with all due respect, your politics are not Labour politics. You are the antithesis of the Labour Party.
I'm a pragmatist.
This channel is the antithesis of Labour politics. So the majority of people you will hear from will be leaning Conservative. Now, of course, those people deserve representation, deserve to be heard, but they're not going to like things like net zero schemes, tackling climate change, tackling things that the Labour Party deems to be important, because they're just not those kind of people. And these are things that I deem to be important as a progressive. You're not a progressive, so I don't expect you to agree.
Well, that was James Mathewson earlier, former Labour Party spokesman. He's right, I don't agree at all. The economy is pretty much in the toilet. And as I said earlier, also, it must be pretty galling for the Conservatives when the economy was starting to grow. And actually, the real-term effects of this is people around the country who are desperate for their mortgages to go down, for interest rates to come down. And because the government has played fast and loose with this by throwing money, hosing money at unions without actually exacting reforms from those unions in terms of their working practices, that means that the majority of people in this country are going to be worse off. And we're seeing this the whole time. And again, the winter fuel allowance, a disastrous move in my humble opinion, because it consigns elderly people to being cold, and it will mean that they bounce into hospital over the festive period. And I just think it is fundamentally unjust, and that is what people are venting when Yvette Cooper is there handing out a mince pie to a member of the public, and quite rightly, she got short shrift. Lots of you getting in touch. James in Nebworth says, good morning, I fully support Reform doing whatever they can to help the United Kingdom, even working with Labour, but I do draw the line at Mandelson. Graham Pack. I was saying earlier that Keir Starmer needs a holiday. He says he's very tired. He needs a holiday. And I think, actually, he hasn't really grasped how much how under fire he will be in the first few months of his premiership. Now, Starmer needs a holiday, Graham in Bushy says. He could always go to the Chagos Islands. It will be nice and quiet there before our useless Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, gives it away. It's a really interesting one, this, the Chagos Islands. I wonder whether the incoming Trump administration will actually block that. We shall see. Let's take a voice note now from Susan. Good morning.
Good morning, David, and happy Christmas to you. Re the grocery situation. At the moment, all big supermarkets are telling their loyalty card holders they can buy their vegetables cheaply, i.e. I paid 15p for every vegetable in Tesco's. Now, if they can do this at Christmas, why can't they do it all year? And the idea of a grocery tax from the government is disgusting, because we're already taxed enough, and the poor shops selling are going to have even more taxes. So I don't agree with the grocery tax, but I do wonder why our supermarkets can't do cheap vegetables all year if they can do it at Christmas.
And that is a brilliant point. I want cheap vegetables. I want people to eat healthily. I want people to feel empowered. And thank you very much for that voice note this morning. Alex Phillips, good morning. What
empowered? Have you become Meghan Markle?
I like empowerment.
All right.
What's wrong with that?
I find it problematic.
Why? No, because the whole point is you want to give people tools so that they can actually make their own decisions.
I know, yeah, no, I like it.
You've attacked me already this morning.
I love you, David, but I thought you were a hard liner. I just have that on my list of the dark words of the opposition.
No. I like that one. Anyway, how are you?
I'm all right, yeah.
Good, all right. Ready for Christmas?
Yeah, no.
Oh, what are you doing?
What am I doing for Christmas?
Yes.
I'm just, hanging around here, mainly.
Right. OK, what's coming up on the show?
Well, the economy, guess what? It's going great guns in the wrong direction.
Yes.
So we're going to be discussing that. Also, I think we still have so many questions about what went on at Magdeburg, at that Christmas market.
I would agree. Absolutely. So. I mentioned this yesterday. Obviously, this man worked as a doctor. He exhibited some erratic behaviour. Also, it seems that he had some paranoid thoughts as well.
Yeah.
No one's really been talking about that. And, of course, they'll be trying to ascertain more about his mental state as well. But, obviously, terrible human tragedy. And also, how on earth he was able to do that and to drive the car.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's sad, isn't it, that this is now sad. Christmas markets are a target. I think a Birmingham Christmas market, the main one, has been closed as a result of this. It's just, it's tragic. This is what's happening to our society these days.
It is, and actually, apparently, I was hearing earlier that a police presence at Christmas markets is de rigueur. It's just unusual in this country because we don't tend to have armed police.
Well, you remember, of course, because we were both in Brussels as
were.
MEPs, the heavy police presence, because they had huge problems with terrorism there, the heavy police presence with guns and all sorts.
Yes, it
constantly.
was. It was. I remember vividly, actually. It's going to be a tricky time. I mean, it's very interesting listening to Labour pundits saying, oh, no, they've made all the difficult decisions and people will feel better off. Well, right now at Christmas, I'm not sure anyone's feeling very well off. Anyway, Alex, I hope you have a wonderful show. Will I see you tomorrow as well?
Yeah.
Hey, excellent.
I'll be nicer to you.
Oh, good. Empowerment. Alex is up next. Thank you so much for your support and for all your comments. Lots of you getting in touch about Keir Starmer and the terrible start that they have actually had to their government and to his premiership. The question is, can he actually make amends in the new year? We shall see. Alex Phillips is up next. I will be back, you'll be delighted to know, from 6 o'clock tomorrow for Morning Glory. Thanks ever so much for your company. Stay tuned. Alex is next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, good morning and welcome to the show. This is Alex Phillips with you for 3 whole hours on the eve of Christmas Eve here on Talk, the home of common sense, on DAB Plus Radio, on YouTube, on your smart speaker, your connected device, and, of course, on our wonderful app. If you haven't downloaded it, give yourself an early Christmas present, because you know that funny period between Christmas and New Year where you don't know what day of the week it is and you don't really know what planet you're on? That is when you need to go on the app and go back through all the archives. You can actually just go, I'm going to pretend it was a happier time of... Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know what's been a happier time in 2024. Perhaps you will let me know. Now, coming up on the show, talking about happier times, we were promised growth, weren't we, by the Labour government, by both parties in that snap general election. Well, the economy's certainly been going great guns. And the only problem is it's rather been in the wrong direction. The new figures out this morning has shown that GDP has flatlined. Woohoo! And German authorities are facing pressure to explain why a doctor accused of using a car to murder a child and 4 women at a Christmas market and injure countless others was not apprehended, despite already being well known to the police. And Sir Keir Starmer has faced strong criticism last night for pushing through yet another net zero tax hike. Struggling households could see their bills rise by as much as 56 quid following the Prime Minister's quiet approval of a new levy on plastic packaging. And thousands of travellers hoping to make it home for Christmas have been forced to arrange last-minute alternatives. Flights, ferries and trains are all cancelled across the UK, while drivers are being warned of icy conditions on the roads. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm pleased to tell you, well, pleased for you, less so for me, that I'm joined in the studio by Sam Armstrong. I say less so for me because you're sniffling, you got balsam tissues or something on your eyes, like a myxomatosis-y.
Yeah, I know. I'm enduring the long-term legacy of broadcasting with Julia last week, who was particularly unwell.
Yeah, sharing is not caring.
Well, she hosted a massive, big super spreader Christmas party and then brought it back to the studio and gave it to me.
Yeah, I was there. I was slightly under the weather when I went to her Christmas party.
Patient zero has been identified.
Patient zero, yeah. And it looks like it's got a pretty successful R rate in Talk Towers. Well, talking about things spreading and growing, the same cannot be said of the UK's economy at the moment. I don't see why anyone out there should be remotely surprised by this. I mean, if you were going to, kneecap one's economy, the first thing you'd do is go, let's make it really difficult for employers to, make profits, such as, tax them, which is exactly what the Labour Party have done with the so-called black hole that needed filling. This is a subject that we've revisited time and again on this show. Sir Keir Starmer would say, well, look, I don't want to be judged on right now. We've made tough decisions because we need to pump all of this extra money into infrastructure, into the health service, into the things that this country needs to function efficiently. You just blow your nose there, Sam, don't you worry, I can fill the time. All the stuff that's needed to make the economy function efficiently, but we will reap the dividends of this policy, not now, but tomorrow. It's the jam tomorrow ethos that we've heard of successive governments. Do you think that there's any way, shape or form that this economy can turn around under the Labour government?
Well, I think Keir Starmer's problem is this, which is the economy was growing in the first half of this year. It was slow. We're talking about 0.6%. You double that, you get 1.2%. You really want to be enjoying, in historic terms, growth of 2-3%. There was a time that this country's economy grew by 5% every year, which is a level that people can really see themselves getting wealthier. But Labour come in, they talked down the economy all summer, and business was saying, what are you doing here? What are you doing? We can see overseas investors being put off. We can see people getting less excited. And this data here is all of the evidence of that. But then what we don't have is the impact of this budget, right? Because this budget came at the end of this period. So what we don't have is the impact on employers being able to employ people, because the taxes they pay, the tax they have to pay in order to hire someone to come work for them, assuming they're employed rather than self-employed, so you can see what's going to happen there, have gone up. And that's going to work its way through as yet another hit. Now, they're right. They're going to bung a load more money on the NHS. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to hire a load more locum doctors, probably from overseas.
But I want you to say that because GP surgeries are of the cohort who have said the increase in employers' national insurance is going to affect them as well.
Well, and this is it. And this is always the problem with trying to tax and spend yourself out of economic trouble, which is you take a bit from him, then you need to give a bit more to them, and then you need to take a bit more from them, and the cycle goes round and round and round and round. So the truth is, I fear that we're going to endure a recession next year, because this is the first quarter of no growth. I suspect we're going to see negative growth in this quarter. We might even see 2 quarters of that. That is either a technical recession or pretty much a full-on recession. And that will be, I think, the first time that a new government has so quickly, through the decisions that it has taken, sent us into a recession. Even Liz Truss didn't manage that.
Poor Liz, you know, I'm quite sympathetic towards Liz. I know Liz quite well, and listening to what she has sort of said about the way the Bank of England behaved ahead of her budgets being announced, it does concern me that whatever rosette goes on, you know, the candidate who ends up in number 10, we seem to have a sort of civil service out there. We seem to have a nebulous now of entities, from the OBR to, well, you name them, Bank of England's in there, who have more power and more influence than whoever ends up in government, and seem to call the shots. And repeatedly, they seem to call it for managed decline.
Well, and it's been very interesting to see who's recognised that. No other than Keir Starmer or Morgan McSweeney, his chief of staff we read in the newspapers, have turned around and said, oh, I can see what Dominic Cummings, who went in there, of course, under Boris and tried to blow it all up from the inside, was saying, which is everything we try and do doesn't work, and there is something deeply, deeply sick about the way that this country governs itself.
And yet, I remember in the King's Speech, which of course is the first opportunity that the new Prime Minister has to outline their programme of government, I remember Sir Keir Starmer announcing no fewer than 11 quangos in that. Oh, a Skills Britain committee or something, more powers to the OBR. It seems to me that he came in and went directly for the big state route, which now he's complaining about.
Well, quite right. I mean, no worse example than Great British Energy, an energy company that's going to cost us £10 billion and not even produce any energy. It's going to sit somewhere in the middle, buying up stuff, selling up stuff, all at taxpayers' expense. We know they have a long history of losing money. But look, this is the trouble with every Labour government that comes in. They immediately pull the lever of more spending, more taxes, and it takes them a while to realise that actually that isn't how you grow the economy. And look, where have they put a load of money? Paying off the unions. What have they not got in exchange for paying off the unions? Basic reforms to the way in which they function, so that train drivers, for example, are expected to work a full day's work in very much the way that you or I would think what working looks like. But no, they give them the money first, they ask questions later. And I know Keir Starmer was very disappointed about that, but he was just, of course, one of many to have felt defrauded by his then Transport Secretary.
There's definitely a naivety with this government, and that's sort of the mildest commentary that I can give, I think. But is there a chance, I mean, given that they've sat there and gone, OK, we're not being allowed to do what we want to do by the apparatchiks of Whitehall, who have essentially tied our hands behind our back. We've seen the light now, the scales have fallen from our eyes. Is there a possibility there could be a Christmas miracle and Sir Keir Starmer might make a New Year's resolution and say, do you know what, I'm going to start cutting when it comes to the amount of the bureaucracy, the red tape of the civil service. I'm going to sort of actually, in the spirit of Brexit, understand what so many of my predecessors have said before. And because he's got a big majority, he might actually be able to do something about that.
Zero chance whatsoever. Keir Starmer is first and foremost a North London lawyer, and he buys into this legalistic system by which anyone can challenge decisions made by any different government, the whole culture of judicial review, of human rights claims, of people frustrating and blocking their removal from this country. He was the lawyer that was bringing exactly these claims and breaking that system, changing that system, going back to a kind of common law legal system, which is what the likes of Jonathan Sumption are suggesting, would involve massive totemic change that would be uncomfortable, would be unpleasant, and for those in the Westminster world.
Maybe everyone's capable of a sort of Damascene conversion, right? And knowing that you worked closely with Robert Jenrick, he is such a man who had a Damascene conversion. As far as I'm aware, he had said to someone we both have in common that when he went into the Home Office as Minister for Immigration, he suddenly became radicalised by reality. We all saw a sort of One Nation Tory turn into to, you know, one of the sort of most snapping, right-wing, grassrootsy, true blue Tory that the party could boast. So is it possible, actually, that anybody, when they find themselves in a situation where the real world, you know, smacks them between the eyes, can suddenly go, oh, I got this wrong?
Well, normally people, as they get older, tend to track over to the right. It's the great saying: if you're not a communist in your youth, you've got no heart, and if you're not a conservative in your dotage, you've got no brain. But people in the Labour Party, those surrounding Keir Starmer, are very much the exceptions to that rule. They've been going through life and they've been tracking to the left, although maybe not quite as left as he once was for Keir Starmer. He now recognises the royal family, for example, which in an earlier age he was a Republican. But he is someone that is ideologically wedded to a world that is very different from that he's confronting. I suspect he will get some of the way, but I don't think what we're looking here in Keir Starmer is like a Tony Blair figure, someone from the left, but that went in practically, might not agree with everything he did, but was able to look at a lot of these problems and solve them, and even now offers government advice. I remember during lockdown, he was more of a lockdown sceptic than many around government, I think because of his sense and his knowledge of how government works. I don't think Keir Starmer's that kind of intellect.
One thing I would say that maybe the left wing historically could be accused of is the politics of gerrymandering, really, you know, trying to cling on to power at all costs and actually sort of manoeuvring in order to do this. Now, I'm quite alarmed at some of the things the Labour Party have done. If I was sitting there working in an election campaign in the developing world, I'd be calling it out for what it is, which is fiddling around with the political system to try and enshrine power for futurity. Now, first of all, we had the Labour Party suggest that perhaps they want to look at the structure of things like unitary authorities. So maybe the local elections next May might not happen while they do that. And I thought to myself, you're probably going to lose a lot of local councillors, aren't you? And Reform could do very well out of that. Then all of a sudden you have the IPPR think tank, a very left-wing think tank, somehow out of nowhere produce a report saying, maybe we should look at the provenance of funding for political parties, particularly if they come from individuals who are overseas. And then this was given to ELCOM, and then Sir Keir Starmer said, oh, yes, we must look into that. Now, the Labour Party have a rich history of taking donations from people who are not necessarily British-born. And you kind of think to yourself, oh, is this because they're worried that the Reform Party might be getting a big charity cheque from the likes of Elon Musk, even if it were through a UK-based entity? Now we suddenly find out that they want to look at the right to vote for 16 and 17-year-olds because, like you said, a lot of youngsters sort of grow up with that beautiful soft ideology that the world would be much better if we all shared everything, and are therefore more inclined to vote for the left. When I look at these three things put together, it looks to me no better than a cheap dictator of a banana republic trying to make sure that they stay on in power even though they're failing.
Absolutely right. There has never been an administration that has crashed in popularity quite so quickly. Frankly, there's never been an administration that entered government with so little support. We forget this, of course. Keir Starmer's got a supermajority in Parliament, but he got fewer votes than Jeremy Corbyn did in 2017, right? This is not a popular guy. This is someone whose opposition was split between Reform, Conservatives, those staying at home and protest at how bad the last government was. And every step he's taking is designed to keep him there for as long as possible. And it's not just the three steps you outlined. He's also trying to fiddle with the House of Lords. He kicked out the Conservative-dominated hereditary peers, and last week, to replace them, he appointed 30 new Labour peers. Labour say, oh, we're not even sure on the House of Lords. Well, they were pretty sure last week when they stuffed it with their cronies.
Yeah.
People who had failed to get re-elected, people that had had a long history of scandal and all the rest of it. They were all happy to shove them up there. Sue Gray leading the way.
Oh, yeah, of course. I almost forgot that. Blimmin' heck. It's shocking. I mean, I genuinely think I'm quite worried about this. I'm very worried about this. Even when you look at the appointment over in America as a US ambassador in the shape of Lord Mandelson, this is a political appointment, the likes of which hasn't happened since the 1970s. Normally these people come from the diplomatic corps, who are sort of trained in the business of how the Foreign and Commonwealth Office works. And I know Peter Mandelson is technically a very experienced politician. We know that he sort of his orbit tends to be that of around Brussels. And you kind of, I get the impression with the Labour government, they've gone, right, we've got this stonking great majority, which frankly we probably don't deserve. I think they're very aware of that. They know how unpopular they are. And I think they're trying to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible, to ram things through, to really get their agenda just baked in, whether it's the appointments of all of these quangos and so forth, and GB Energy, and, oh, there's a black hole, we need all your money right now in the very first budget because we've got to pay for all of our extreme socialism. But then fiddling about, like you said, at every single level, voting age, House of Lords, party donations. I'm sorry, but this looks like the sort of politics that you get in a country like Tanzania.
Yeah, and Peter Mandelson, of course, is a bonkers appointment. This is someone that has been as offensive as you could possibly be to Donald Trump for as long as you possibly could. And look, Donald Trump, whatever you think of him, is somebody who likes this country. He likes this country. He's been very clear. He's got a Scottish family. He likes this country. And that comes after Joe Biden, who actively disliked the UK. He was from that sort of Irish-American extract that viewed us with some suspicion. And that presents us with an opportunity, or it could have done. We could trade on that goodwill. We could trade on that like for us. And, you know, we could enjoy new trading relations. We could build things together. We could do all of this. And what Peter Mandelson does is he throws all of that away. Now, I've got no problem with politicians being ambassadors. I think they can often be very good ones. We've seen good ones over here from the likes of Australia, for example, where it's very common for retired politicians to be ambassadors. But if you'd asked me to pick a worse choice for that job, I couldn't have done it than Peter Mandelson.
And yet he's there saying, look, I would be willing to work with Farage. I don't think he's really got a choice. I think my view of this is if you've got someone like Nigel Farage who may have the presidency, who we know will, you know, be over there at inauguration and no doubt be chatting away with the Donald. I'm sure that they speak on the phone from time to time. That actually, if you don't have him inside the tent doing the proverbial in the outwards direction, you're going to find quite the opposite.
Well, and that's right. I mean, America has been very clear that it wants to clamp down on what it perceives as trade abuses around the world. Now, some of them could, for example, be putting further massive tariffs on the likes of Airbus, who people in Belfast work for big facilities out there making their aircraft, and that could put them out of business, out of work. He could put tariffs on Scotch whisky, for example. He could withdraw support and military aids that he's often provided for our projects. We need this alliance more than any other. But, of course, it's not just a binary thing, right? It's not just, are we friends to them or not? We're not. If we can't rely on the US as much, to whom do we have to turn?
Oh, yeah,
Brussels
back
and
to
the EU.
Brussels. I know, shouldn't we be so lucky? Oh, don't make me go back into the pit and go through it all again. It was hard enough first time around. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because there is so much to chew over. 2 days before Christmas, we're going to be filling up your cup with common sense. If you want to join us in that process, the number is 03444 1000. If you dial that, hopefully we'll get you on the blower after this break. You can alternatively send me a WhatsApp message using that number, or leave me a voice note. I do like a little voiceo. It's nice to just sit there. I never know. It's like a bit of a Christmas cracker. The producer presses go and you don't know what's going to come out. So same number for that. If you'd like to send me a good old-fashioned text message, 8722. Remember to put the word talk before your text. That way it manages to wend its way through the pinball satellites up there in the ether. It avoids the International Space Station where those two poor people are trapped. I hope they have a decent Christmas. And it pings the aerials on top of the talk towers right here and ends up in this Cape Canaveral in front of me. Right, without any further ado, here are the things that pay my wages, and I'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
insurance contributions for employers. They said that didn't amount to putting up Nick's contributions on working people, which was, of course, a pledge in their manifesto.
Do you believe that?
No, I think that they should have been explicit before the election. They should have said we're going to have to introduce it. They should have been honest that you have to split national insurance contributions and they have to put it up. But of course, they didn't want to be labelled as same old Labour tax and spend, put up your taxes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Have you done your wrapping? Is that what you're doing right now while you're listening to me? Have you already started on the sherry? I wouldn't blame you if you had. I'd be envious if you are. But let me keep you company all the way through to 1 o'clock as you probably start the preparations for Christmas. I bet a lot of you now have signed off for the holidays. Don't worry, I'm going to keep you company throughout Christmas. I'm going to be here from 10 till 1, everything other than Christmas Day, because, well, no one's here on Christmas Day. We get to actually enjoy it. And Boxing Day, because that is Alexmas. That indeed is the day that I was born, so I've given myself that day off as well. Let's speak to David now, who is in South Wales. Hi, David. Bore da, as I always say.
Oh, bore da. Sure, he was here. I was thinking about the Labour Party policy with the budget.
Yes.
And they seem to not thought it through, because I have every confidence that businesses will continue to make profits. But what were they at the cost of people's jobs? Right. So it is, the businesses will survive. People won't, not in the...
I think you're absolutely right. By the way, was that Happy Christmas you just said to me in Welsh?
No, I just asked how we today.
I'm afraid I might be called Phillips, and I might have a bit of an accent, but it's actually West Country, and so Borodar is where it begins and ends with me, I'm afraid. And I didn't want to look like John Redwood doing the national anthem there, you know, and sort of goldfish at you. And I think you're right about the businesses, you know, because when in a situation of, okay, do I save my business? Do I make sure the shareholders are happy, or that I can pay staff I've already got, or pay my suppliers, or whatever it is? A business isn't going to be like, oh, I know, I'm going to employ some more people, or keep the staff body I've got that I can no longer afford at the cost to the profit margins. They're just, that isn't what businesses do. They're not charities. And then this is a government, of course, that promised worklessness was going to be a thing of the past. They've scoffed at the Tories and pointed the finger of accusation when it comes to the unsustainable levels of immigration, and sort of suggested they're going to do something about it. But this is clearly not the right approach.
No, I grew up with a Labour Party that was for the working people. And in the South Wales valleys, it was very important. We've still got the hereditary vote going to the Labour Party in Wales, which are a bunch of clowns. But, the thing is that they are not any longer interested in the people. It's just they are what sounds good on WhatsApp and or Facebook or whatever. You know, it does nothing to do with people.
Right. You know, I have a feeling the upcoming Senedd elections next year are going to be very interesting indeed. I mean, there was, of course, that one spell where you had a Labour-Plaid coalition. I just wonder if the landscape would change in Wales, because you've got an element of proportional representation in there. Very Brexity part of the UK. Sensible people over in Wales, particularly in the South Wales valleys. So perhaps you will no longer live under a one-party state next year. Here's hoping for you, David. Right, thank you ever so much. Let's speak now to another Dave who is in London. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Alex, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I was on one of the talk programmes a while ago, and they said, "How long do you think Labour will last? One or two sessions?" And I think people said one, and I said it'll definitely be two, if not three, because they will now work on maintaining power, which is what left-wing governments do. They'll pack the House of Lords, give 16-year-olds the votes. They'll change boundaries. They'll give anyone who works the right to vote, e.g. migrants. They'll build predominantly in Tory areas because they'll hope that's another Labour voter every time they get a house. They'll stop any reform donations. They'll crack down on what they call fake news, which will be GB News, Talk News, and anyone that sort of has any kind of view against them. Then they'll block any stories that impact them. They'll make dates for trials like they have for when Trump's inaugurated in January 20th.
Oh, I know. All the big ones are coming up then, aren't they, on the 20th of January? Busy day in the courts.
Everything they do is about maintaining power, and that's it. And by the way, the left are good at it. That's what Biden did. They just shut him in a box and kept him out of the way because they knew the best way to keep power. So we've only got, I am a lifelong Tory voter. I voted Reform at the last election. I knew this would happen. I didn't realise it'd be anything as bad as this, but I knew it could be. But this is the only chance we've got now. If the country doesn't wake up and put in a Reform government and completely dismantle every single quango. I'd just draw up a list if I was Richard Tice, and I would publish it and go, here are 161 quangos that on the day we come into power will cease to exist. We want a list of action items now. If Kemi Badenoch starts saying, I need to think it through, I don't know what I'm going to inherit, I think I'll fix some foundations. I'm sorry, Kemi, I want a list of very, very specific actions. I want names on the lists. I want to know what you're going to do on day one, and I want it done. No more manifestos, none of this nonsense. We want
I feel like you are a man who would quite like an election campaign where Farage and Tice are going around on top of the infamous double-decker bus with Milei's chainsaw telling everybody what sort of dogery they're going to be doing, like some sort of builder version of Star Wars. I think a lot of people out there would agree with you. Of course, plenty of other parties are available to vote for. We have to make that very clear before our collars are felt. Let's do some of your messages now. Thank you, by the way, Dave. I really liked your insights there. Look, we were talking about this, weren't we, earlier, what Dave just said, before I go on to some of the messages, which is this idea that we have this sort of huge behemoth, this sort of glacial-paced, bureaucratic, Gordian knot of managed decline that just isn't fleet of foot, that it can't go to the places it needs to go. And, Milei has done a brilliant job in Argentina, some would say. This is the sort of viewpoint now of, what Elon Musk is supposed to be doing in the Department of Government Expenditure, Doge, over in America. Would it actually, as a man who's worked in politics, would it be possible to do here? Is this sort of one of those pipe dreams? Oh, yeah, we can do that. We're going to shrink the civil service by 2/3. We're going to Can it be done?
Yes, but it requires two things. Firstly, a united team led by someone who truly believes that this is what is necessary to do and is prepared to put their fingers in their ears when the howling, when the leaking, when the revenge claims of bullying and misconduct and all the rest of the nonsense that civil servants do whenever you try and take them on start coming. They have to be prepared to do that. And secondly, and this is crucial, and this is where Liz Truss fell down, you have to have a mandate to do it. You can't come in mid-term and say, I've felt this for a really long time and this is what I want to do. No, you have to come in with all of the strengths, much like Keir Starmer. When you come in with like a 150-seat majority, but even like an 80-seat majority like Boris Johnson, you can get a lot done. You've got a lot of moral legitimacy, You've got a lot of political legitimacy, and you can take that fight. Regrettably, nobody has come at it with that. Well, not since the late 1980s.
Boris on the right was the only person really with the opportunity to make real change. And one feels rather that Boris ended up doing kind of the opposite when you look at immigration statistics and net zero targets. Let's do some of your messages now. This is an interesting one from Stuart. Lucy Powell tried to defend Labour's terrible effects on the economy by saying it's like turning around an oil tanker. Well, Labour has hauled the oil tanker below the waterline. I think this is what we're talking about. What we need is an upgrade. We need to get rid of the blimmin' oil tank, which is frankly the Costa Concordia at the moment, whatever that boat was called, and turn it into some sort of speed vessel. We need a catamaran or something, a hovercraft. when it comes to the operations of this country, its economy and government. Good morning, Alex, says Dave, listening in Ireland. This is a Dave-heavy show, isn't it? Lots of Dave. Got an English Dave in London, a Welsh Dave in South Wales, a Dave in Ireland. Where's my Scottish Dave? If that's you, send me a message or give me a call. I was just thinking, has Kiat been doing all this international travel so he and his crew can buy all their Christmas presents duty-free? Friends and family all getting a bottle of whiskey and 200 fags, as he doesn't want to support local shops and pay the tax. Merry Christmas. Do you honestly think Sir Keir Starmer's got friends who like drinking whiskey and smoking fags? Really? I don't think he's that interesting. I can't imagine that. I'd be interested to know, if you ask Sir Keir Starmer the question of what's your favourite tipple, I'd imagine he'd be like, I don't drink. A bit like, what's your favourite book? I don't read. What's your favourite TV programme? I don't watch television. You know, do you have a soul? I don't have one of those. So there you go. Morning, Alex, says John in Rotherham. Great show. Really admire your guest, Sam. Well, we'll see. If in about 3 days' time I start getting that tingling sensation in my nose and a scratchy voice, the admiration I have for him at present will dwindle. Keep up the good work and thanks for keeping us sane. If you're coming to me for sanity, Lord help you. Right, we'll take a short break now. And when we come back, it's time to look further afield and see what is going on in the wider world, because it may be Christmas, but there is not peace on earth. I'm back after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Well, let us immediately get on the good ship, Alex, the HMS Common Sense, Major General Chip Chapman, ex-head of counter-terrorism at the MOD. Chip, brilliant to have you on the show, and I can't think, as the former ex-head of counter-terrorism at MOD, someone better to speak to about what went on in Magdeburg. Of course, we won't have as much information or any information at all, nor do we necessarily deserve it as Brits, as the German authorities will. But it certainly hasn't stopped tongues wagging over here when it comes to motives or questions about failures in German security for this to have happened. Yet again, it's a country that has been rather plagued of late by, I'll say, terrorist attacks, and I'm doing air quotes for those who are listening and not watching, because there was another sort of terrorist attack in Essen a couple of months ago. What do you think has been the major failing? Why is this man, when it seems to me was reported repeatedly to the police over a number of years, not dealt with sooner?
Well, there are two failures to begin with. The first one is the protective security failure. So from a UK perspective, under the contest strategy, that's the counter-terrorism strategy, one of the strands of that is protect, and therefore you embed security into these crowded places events. That went wrong, which gave him access to the vehicle to allow him to plough down. The second one you have to look at is, was he what they call Gefahrder? Now, a Gefahrder in German terms is the equivalent of a subject of interest. So was he on their sort of list or target of people? And I know people have said that the Saudis gave various warnings about this, but the simple fact is in counterterrorism work there is a prioritization grid. And even if he was on that list, it is obvious that he wasn't a priority 1A or 1B candidate on that list. That is, that they had information about attack planning. Now, of course, he did do an attack. So either that was wrong, or what is really difficult, even in the age of AI and machine learning, which is some of the things which were the outcome, for example, of the 2017 attacks in the UK of vehicle as a weapon, particularly Manchester, which wasn't vehicle as a weapon, the Westminster Bridge and London Bridge, is that AI is great at some things, but it's not great at social outcomes. That is, knowing the exact moment when someone will attack. There are a number of anomalies in this, which is why at the moment it's not being called a terrorist attack. So again, the difference between those is that a grievance with no ideology is a criminal murder. A grievance with ideology would give you terrorism. Now, again, the anomaly with this guy is he seems to have rejected Islam. He may have gone towards a right-wing methodology, but actually he was a Shia. And Shia from Saudi Arabia are the minority in Saudi Arabia, hated by the majority Wahhabists. And that's another anomaly. That is why I think the German authorities at the moment have not called this yet as a terrorist attack. Now, again, to give you a comparison with two in the UK where people, again, shouted terrorist attack and it wasn't. The first one is the attack in 2021 by Jake Davidson, an incel attack, involuntary celibate attack, killed 5 people and then himself. That was deemed, again, not to be a terrorist attack because of the predominance of mental health issues with that chap. The second one was the November 21 attack on the Liverpool hospital, which may have some resonance with this one, where that, again, was not deemed to be a terrorist attack because of the grievance with this bloke, which was similar because he had problems with his immigration status. Put all that to one side, this guy will be charged with multiple murder, which is always the outcome because there's no crime in law of terrorism. There's a crime in law of common law of murdering people, which is what he did.
When we see things like this happen over in mainland Europe, we instantly worry about our own situation back here in the UK. We know that there is still a vast number of people, I'm sure, on the terrorism watch list. I remember the days when we used to have a sort of traffic light system of what the terror threat level was. I haven't heard that for a while, and thankfully, we have, of course, seen the horrific incident in Southport, but you get the impression that we're not having as many direct threats as perhaps we once were, and I don't know if that's the case, actually. But how would you read our situation here, especially with things in a powder keg over in the Middle East? We know that we have had people coming into the country who are totally undocumented. I'm aware that a number of organisations who profit in part from people trafficking are terrorist organisations. And so you'd have to be concerned that we are also in a perilous position here in the United Kingdom when it comes to those who mean harm against our society. How do you read this situation? Do you think that we are in a very difficult situation right now?
Yeah, I think since 7th of October, the amount of hate crimes and extremism has been amplified, particularly by social media. Now, again, in terms of the net and gross of terrorism, there can be a lot of plots in the gross. Very few actually go on to be the net, which is the lethality of terrorist attacks. In terms of your point about a traffic light system, one of the things which may have surprised me, but is a good thing in lots of ways, is that the terrorist threat level in GB at the moment is substantial. That is, an attack is likely. It's been come down about 2 years ago from a severe, that is, an attack is highly likely. Now, neither of those in a way means that there might not be an attack tomorrow. And generally, every Christmas, you get a warning that an attack is inevitable. That is actually a securocrat cop-out. Of course, an attack is inevitable, but unless you put a time frame on that and a scale, it's a cop-out because it doesn't bound what you mean by that. Everyone needs to be vigilant, and that's always the message every Christmas. Action counters terrorism. Act, as the counter-terrorist command would tell you. And if you have any concerns of anyone anywhere in the country, either for radicalisation or things you've seen, then dial 0800 789 321, because the overall message is always make nothing happen. So we need to be vigilant at all times. What I've said about the German thing, though, and this still applies to the UK thing, is this is obviously an iceberg. So, for example, the Domestic Intelligence Agency of Germany is called the BFV. They have multiple thousand Islamist terrorist personnel potential. That is, those who could go from this gross, potentially wanting to do attack planning, into taking executive action. 90% of those have a migration background. So, of course, in a future election, immigration is bound to be a concern for the future, and the party which can sort out that and the economy is going to win lots of seats.
Fascinating, albeit quite harrowing stuff there. Major General Chip Chapman, thank you ever so much for coming and giving us the unvarnished truth of the reality of the situation, both here in the United Kingdom and, of course, across Europe. Before I go to break, I just want to get your thoughts on that, Sam.
Well, look, we now have a deeply, deeply dangerous world right on our shores, and that is one of the effects, I regret to say it, of mass migration over the last 25 years, which is the threat is now within the gates. We know the fact that we need barriers around Christmas markets. Why? Why the barriers around Christmas markets? We know why. Everybody knows why. This country has got less safe. It's a sad fact that we live in. None of our politicians seem to be prepared to call that out, or if they are, they're in a very small minority.
Do you know, it just sent a little shiver down my spine. It brought to mind the words of my very good friend who has worked for MI5, MI6, the SAS, still does lots of work in the intelligence industry, and he always says to me, Alex, stop taking the tube. And it's harrowing. Oh, shall we try and cheer ourselves up after the break? I think it's going to be difficult because we're going to be talking about the state of the NHS, but we're going to be kept good company, at least, by Roy Lilly, who's former NHS Trust Chairman. We're back after this.
got a Secret Santa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And what do you? And are you one of?
I've bought for the siblings, bought for the parents.
How many siblings?
I've got 2 siblings, but not here to show off. But if I can make one semi-serious point from over
Yes.
COVID, online culture for shopping is great and Amazon is wonderful, but let's remember our small businesses.
I agree.
Which are struggling this Christmas. Where I come from, down in Honiton, Sidmouth, we have amazing small businesses in East Devon, and if you've got the opportunity to go out
politician.
and buy something from a local shop,
honestly, you're speaking
it's a
like
great
a politician.
opportunity.
No, I totally
I'm speaking
agree.
like an ordinary person, David, that wants our small business to see out this Labour government.
I totally agree.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, it's not going to be any surprise if I tell you that there are people who have been treated in NHS hospital corridors. Well, it turns out the NHS is now spending a record £12.3 billion in outsourcing patients to private hospitals in a bid to clear waiting lists and, get the whole operation, mind the pun, a bit better oiled and hopefully reduce the amount of people blocking beds and being treated in corridors. Is it going to work? Let's speak to Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman, a man who might have some answers for us. Is it going to be enough to throw £12.3 billion to get patients into private hospitals? Do you agree with this policy? Is it the right action to take?
Well, look, there's a lot of pressure on the NHS to bring waiting lists down, and the private sector can do some of it. Most private hospitals, not all, but most private hospitals don't have ITU, don't have recovery if something goes wrong. So they can do the fairly simple stuff on patients who are relatively fit. So, I mean, it's one of these, like the advert says, every little helps. So, yes, it does help bring down part of the waiting list, but it is not a solution. The big issue we've got right now, as you were talking about earlier, is we've got patients in corridors. We've got patients in corridors because we've got patients in bed in hospital. I mean, last night there were about 13,000 people in hospital who are medically fit to be discharged, but they're frail, elderly, and we can't get them home because social services can't get the care packages together to get them home because they haven't got any money, and the domiciliary care market has been decimated anyway. So that gives us a problem. Now, what happens then if you're running a hospital? The patients are generally over 65, more often in their 70s. They're there for respiratory problems. They only need 2 or 3 days in hospital to get them back on their feet. If they've got other conditions like diabetes or whatever, you can stabilise them and they're medically fit to go home, but you can't get them home. So what happens then is your medical beds get full. When the medical beds get full, what do? Well, all you can do is to start taking medical patients and putting them in surgical beds. Now, surgical beds are the beds that we use for hip operations, knee operations, what we call elective operations, waiting list operations. So when you start encroaching on the surgical beds, that's when you have to ring round and say to people, I know you were coming in for a new hip on Tuesday, but I'm sorry, we've got no beds. So that grinds that part of it down as well. So the whole system clogs up. Why does it clog up? It clogs up every year since about 1999. We've had these problems. It's because no government since 1999 has had the idea, the innovation, or the willingness to fix social services. If you ask anybody running a hospital right now, if they had a Christmas wish, what would they wish for? They'd say fix social services because that will free the whole system up.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, actually, when we hear this repeatedly, bed blocking, people being treated on in hospital corridors, ambulances queuing up in car parks because there's nowhere to put the patients. I remember when I was working over ITV and BBC Wales, a long time ago now, almost 20 years ago, it was a huge story then. And you think 2 decades later, why is nothing being done? Then you see that during COVID, there was all this sort of, we're going to build Nightingale hospitals, and you suddenly see people pulling out their fingers and doing things. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why is it constantly a case of just bailing out the water a little bit every Christmas and hoping it's all going to get better? Why have we not had a policy that says we are going to build, X number of care homes they might be, or we're going to, in every single town and city? We're promised new hospitals by Boris Johnson. I don't understand why every single time we circle back round to, we'll just put more money into the NHS. We're going to try and solve the problem, and it's never solved. And why no one's actually sort of grabbed the nettle on this?
It's capacity. The system just doesn't have the capacity. If you look at the beds per 100,000 population, and you look across the OECD countries or Europe, in the EU, we have fewer beds per head of population than almost any of them. And that's the difficulty. The rot set in, really, in my view. You have to wind the clock back, but it was after the world banking crisis. George Osborne was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He embarked on the austerity program. He cut local authorities' budget by 40%. He did it in two sections, but the upshot was 40%. Now, you can't take 40% out of a system and expect it to function. Also, the NHS had under 2% funding for nearly 10 years. That meant that we didn't repair enough stuff. At the moment, there's a 12 billion outstanding backlog maintenance in hospitals. So we didn't repair enough. We didn't recruit enough, train enough, buy enough kit, innovate enough. The system is just not big enough for a society where there's an elderly population. Most people now, 75% of hospital beds will be occupied by people over 65. And we know it's coming every year. The NHS, people say, oh, well, why doesn't the NHS get ready? It does. The winter plan was actually reviewed and produced back in June because I read it and saw it then and commented on it. The fact of the matter is the NHS doesn't have enough capacity. And as you get an ageing population, the situation gets worse. We have to fix social care. Now, if Johnson stood on the steps of Downing Street and said, oh, we've got an oven-ready solution, he did have. there was a solution, but it was never implemented. That's the issue.
Politics got in the way of actually delivering on political promises. Sam, I want to ask you about this, because do you think as well we have a bit of a societal or cultural issue in this country? The reason I say this is thinking about other countries, and I've had the pleasure and privilege of living in a great many. I think we're probably one of the worst countries in the world when it comes to just saying to old people, all right, you live by yourself. All right, we'll put you in a care home. You would not get away with doing that with Nonna over in Italy. Oh, no, Nonna's coming to live with you.
Yeah, and look, I think there is an extent to which, as families, as people, as communities, we have starved out some of the responsibility that human beings throughout history have always had, the bonds, the ties that we have to our family members, to the state. We don't turn around to the state and say, oh, my child needs its nappy changing every 2 days. The state needs to do that. Somebody needs to come in and care for it. No, we expect parents to do that for children. Now, of course, it's never going to be the case for everyone. Never going to be the case for everyone. But I do think a lot more families could take that responsibility. And by the way, if you ask any person who's thinking about what life's going to be like as they get older, what kind of life would they like to live? Well, it is the life surrounded by friends and family. It is the life where they don't have carers they've never met before coming into their house all hours of the day to do stuff. It's certainly not sitting in a care home. And I think you're absolutely right. I think one of the solutions, we have to look at this because, boy, every time a government has tried to look at this and fund it properly, it has all gone wrong because it just costs so much money, the care system. One of the solutions we have to look at is, for those with parents, for those with families, yes, I suspect people probably do need to do more to care for their own relatives.
Government grants for granny annexes. But it is interesting, I think, in this country socially. There are so many societal things that underpin so many problems we have at the moment. And no government ever wants to meddle in anything at a societal level. They sort of think that their job is to sit there and do input into the system, and this is money here, money in, money out, and so on and so forth. And yet I think if we were able to address some of those, or at least sort of say to the general public, look, there is an agency here. You live in this country and you have a part to play as well in making this. But it's almost like I sound like David Cameron and big society now. But I think it is something that I think we need to start really considering.
Yeah, you only need to look at the baby birth gap we have in this country. Far too many children being born in this country at the moment. It's a real problem. That relies on everybody to, go out and have more babies. But you'll never hear a government minister saying that.
Pro-natalist policies, I agree with those as well. I could hear Roy was actually champing at the bit to get back in there, but I'm afraid we don't have enough time. Thank you ever so much, Roy. Let's pick up on this topic again, because I have a feeling he had some really great points he was going to make there. But alas, I've got to take a short break now. But fear not, there is still 2 more hours of unbridled Phillipsisms coming over the hill for you. I am back just after this. Stay tuned to Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. This is Alex Phipps with you until 1 o'clock here on the eve of Christmas Eve. What are you doing? Are you wrapping presents? Are you getting ready with your turkey already? I don't know, it might be a bit premature there. Are you sort of, I don't know, moving home to fit in a brand new oven so you can put that beast in? That's always the big difficulty of the turkey, isn't it? You've got, not only have you got the turkey to cook, you've got the sort of satellite dishes, from your Brussels sprouts to your stuffing to your sausage meat, your pigs in blankets, your Yorkshire puds, your roast potatoes, your parsnips, all of that stuff. And yet by the time you're like, oh yeah, look at this lovely big bird all dressed up nice, in it goes, you're like, oh, I need a whole, like, 5 Argos now to do the other things. It's like sort of military level coordination. But tell me what you're doing. 0344 499 1000 is the number if you want to send me a WhatsApp message, or even better, leave me a voice note. I love those. And plus, if you're sort of wrapping presents, it's so much easier. You could probably, if you're really sort of dexterous, monodextrous, you could sort of wrap with one hand, press the little microphone button on your phone and sort of do sound effects. But I'm wrapping a present as I'm recording this. Anyway, let me know. And also let me know your thoughts on all things going on that we're talking about today. Your contribution is what makes this radio station so special. As I like to say, it's like community catharsis, group therapy, if you will. We all get together and we share our thoughts, our feelings, our opinions. We share the joy and the laughter, and that's now sounding like a Cliff Richard song. 8722 is the number to text. Put the word talk before your text. That way, it manages to get through all of the overactive satellite dishes, beaming cruddy Christmas classics onto your television sets right now, playing on loop. I don't know, Cliff Richard, I just named him, didn't I? Mariah Carey, all the rest of it. And it wends its way through all of the dross into this very studio where I can read it out. We're on X at Talk TV. OK. Let's crack on, shall we? And welcome to the show, Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, let's start off very quickly with your thoughts on the horrific Magdeburg Christmas market attack over in Germany. A response in Birmingham was to temporarily close their Christmas market. We're seeing sort of fortifications now around what should be, these wonderful, joyful getting-togethers in the UK, sort of armed guards and barricades, and it just makes the heart cry, really, doesn't it? But what are your feelings on what's gone on in Magdeburg and where we're at in Europe in general?
It's absolutely dreadful, isn't it? So I was out in Germany in 2016 after the mass sexual assaults on women in Cologne on the New Year's Eve. And there I was the police advisor to the German police. And what struck me there is that the authorities tried to cover it up for 3 days before it all came out. And it resulted in the police president being sacked. And we see this everywhere, that there's an attempt to sort of cover up the truth. What strikes me here is that the German police have been far quicker to release details saying that the man was from Saudi and giving all sorts of information about him, which is quite at variance with how our government dealt with the Southport incident, the terrible murders there, where it took about 3 months, having been told he was a sort of Cardiff choir boy who did it. So I think throughout Europe, there's real issues that we have millions of people here that we have no idea about. We don't know their motives. But we know there's a real problem with Islamic terrorism, and people are very frightened. And when people can't go out to something as simple as a Christmas market or a celebration on New Year's Eve, which the Cologne incident was, it's absolutely terrible for our society that our politicians have let us down so badly.
Mike, I'm glad you brought up the Cologne incident. I wasn't expecting to go down this route today, but I want you to remind the audience of what happened then, because I'm very aware of what happened. It harrows me to this day, but essentially it was around it was over 1,000 sexual assaults, even a few rapes. It was 1,250, I can't remember, but you will know, that took place, coordinated in Cologne Square, and pretty much all of the perpetrators were men from the Northeast, North Africa and the Middle East. Tell us what happened on that horrific night.
So there was hundreds, if not, as you say, 1,000 sex attacks where women were molested, indecently assaulted, even raped by mass gangs who seemed to be coordinated, who were all allegedly Syrian refugees. People really don't know where they were from. And it all occurred around the Cathedral Platz, the main square near the railway station. And as I've said, the reaction of the authorities was to cover it up, which was an utter scandal. And of course, the women were brave enough to have recorded this on their mobile phones and the like. And this was subsequently used as evidence. That the German police haven't got much experience of dealing with images, things from CCTV and mobile phones. That's why I was sent to assist them. And many of the people were identified by British police super econisers who went there, and some German super econisers who we found. But it just shows the sort of conspiracy that there is to keep people silent, to stop them speaking about this. And what we end up with is the terrible incidents we see. And I think one of the questions is, why didn't the German authorities act on all this information that they've been given about this psychologist, the guy from Saudi? The trouble is, there are too many of these people and too much information for the police and the authorities, the secret services, to act upon. So they're receiving thousands of pieces of information that this man's dangerous, this man's doing this or planning that. And it's a case of, how do you find the wheat from the chaff, or the needle in the haystack? It's utterly scandalous that we have people in this country who are dangerous and we know nothing about.
Right, and we've got people in this country from this country who are dangerous, but the problem is when you import a load of people, and when you look at statistics that other countries publish that we do not, related to particular crimes and immigration, you realise there is a positive correlation, that there is a trend. And yet we wait, don't we, for such statistics to be released to the public, if they're held at all. My suspicion is they probably are. And I want to sort of point now to another crime wave that's hitting the high street this time. 670 shoplifting offences going unsolved every day. Yes, there will be toe rags and ne'er-do-wells who go in there and nick a bottle of gin, or, you know. But what I have seen more and more of is gang-related shoplifting, so connected to criminal organisations. And I don't know if you know, can tell me more about this, but my understanding is you now have criminal gangs from the Balkans and Eastern Europe who come over. They will shoplift to order, not just from, you know, your supermarkets, but also even from restaurants, and raid their sort of, you know, their cellars and things. And they're taking luxury products, they're taking meats, they're taking alcoholic goods, putting them in vans and driving them back over to restaurants and businesses and, I don't know, gangster houses over in their own countries.
Absolutely. I mean, I was speaking to the head of one of the top 6 supermarkets who was saying that baby milk, for example, you'll have politicians saying people are stealing baby milk because their children are, you know, starving to death. Vietnam apparently is the destination of choice for mass amounts of stolen baby milk. Spirits, alcohol is stolen and then sold on to not just illicit clubs, but anybody who will buy it. You know, the idea it's a sort of old lady who's stealing a tin of tuna to stay, you know, stay off the hunger is simply not right. I mean, I've said this before. I dealt with a pub where it was quite a, you know, not the best pub in the world, but the menu was really quite nice. But just across the road was in London was an M&S petrol station. And so what was happening is, as you ordered the nice food, the landlord would task the drug addicts in the back to go and shoplift it, you know. So what ended up on your plate 20 minutes later had just been stolen to order. So it's incredible how much of this is going on. And what's happening is that the police have allowed it to happen, and these gangs have flourished. And one of the big things, Alex, if you steal and run out of the shop, the only thing that's left, there's no fingerprints or DNA, but all this is recorded on CCTV. Yeah. The police have a national database of DNA and fingerprints. They don't have a national database of images. So if you move around like these organised gangs and you steal in Warwickshire, Staffordshire, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, if you leave your image behind, it will never be matched to the other images. So you simply, if you get caught, you get caught for one, you get a £2 fine and move on your way. And the police have not dealt with this, and the result is that people now feel entitled to steal.
I wonder where security guards come into this, because just thinking where I live in London, it's in the centre of London, it's on a very busy thoroughfare, and that thoroughfare is lined with, you know, shops, all the usuals, you know, your small Sainsbury's and your Co-op and all the rest of it, your M&S. And they've all got security guards, and they've all got the sort of things that go beep, 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 you know, if you take products out without scanning your receipt. And yet it's almost guaranteed if you go in there, someone's going to be making off with, you know, armfuls of produce. And security guards just seem unable to do anything. And I kind of think, what's the point?
Yeah, well, a security guard might, deter the old lady with a tin of tuna, but they won't deter an armed group of men who are determined to steal, who will use violence, because a security guard will be told, don't offer any violence, don't get hurt, because if you get hurt, you're not insured. So these poor guys are paid. It's not really the security guards' fault or the shop employees. They've been told by their management, look, if you intervene and you get stabbed with a needle, or somebody grabs hold of you and hits you with it stabs you with a knife, then you won't be insured. You're not trained for that. You just simply let them go. And this is the problem. The thieves know this, and these gangs, as you said, are very organised. They're very determined. They steal to order, and they're simply getting away with it. And we all pay, because for every item stolen, that those pennies and pounds go on to the top of the next thing that we want to buy.
Now, for my generation, I think probably the biggest Christmas film of all time was Home Alone. It was sort of defined our childhood, really, and this idea that you got this kid and the burglars are sniffing around the houses because people might have locked them up and gone on holiday for the festive period, or better still, they've got all these presents, they've got all of this stash, this swag that they might be able to get their hands on. Of course, now, in the modern era, roll that forward, and I'm pretty sure the two burglars in Home Alone would just be lifting people's Amazon parcels from their, hiding places outside houses. How much does this sort of crime go up during the festive period?
It goes up enormously, because there's more and more items available. People are sort of let them be left in garden sheds or in boxes, and thieves know this. But the real problem here is, Alex, is that the thieves know that the police won't do anything about it. And I've looked at, in the last 2 years, 28 of the 43 police forces in England and Wales have been inspected by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, the people who check with police are good or not. Now, of those 28, they're checked on very many things, but one of the most important, of course, is investigating crime. They're judged on how that force investigates offences. And of those 28, only one of them was good. One. There's another category, excellent. None of them were excellent. But of 16 of that 28, they were either inadequate or needs improving. And everybody else was adequate, which is never a good, I get a good idea of my mother if I came home with a school report saying I was adequate. So that is why it's not good enough. The police are focused elsewhere, so people stealing parcels from outside houses is not important. Perhaps if they accompanied with some awful words on Facebook, then something might be done about it. But it's just... The thieves are very clever, the thieves are determined, and the police don't seem to be determined to catch criminals at all.
Yeah, Sam, I mean, it seems to me there's been this huge softening. There's almost like an expectation now that these things have become totally normalised. When I was a kid growing up, if you went in and took a pack of Chewits and Merritts, you're in big trouble. You're being smacked across the wrist, marched back to the shop. Not that I ever did this, I was a good girl. But now, just shoplifting, you just see it everywhere. It's, oh, well, there we go. Oh, someone's been stabbed. And yet we do have a situation where the police are focusing on things that frankly are not crimes. Again, we were talking about the societal problems underneath things like healthcare and social care earlier. And I get the impression there's also a sort of societal problem now with the sort of, it's the sort of the culture of low expectations of what we should tolerate in a society. And this whole idea of, well, a bit like Mike was saying, well, these aren't people who are taking food because the system's unjust and they need food banks. Why is it that we seem to have developed a mindset in this country that, oh, it's acceptable to steal? In fact, it's so normal, nothing's going to happen.
Well, I think there is a line that goes between people putting their feet on the chairs on trains and playing loud music even when it's obnoxious, and just not caring, just choosing to check out from basic societal standards and thinking that they can get away with it. And look, there is a culture of people in this country now, a subgroup, that feel like the normal rules don't apply, and why should they? Because time and time again, they can get away with it. It pays to be a complete and utter, prat, nasty piece of work. But there's also an effect of... in the old days, you knew who your local criminal was.
Exactly.
You knew exactly who he was. He would go down to the town centre, he'd sit around all day drinking, he'd go off and nick something, and when the police saw a little piece of CCTV, they went and saw Colin, because Colin had been thieving again, and Colin would get a night in the cells. Today, people don't know other people. We just don't know them.
And this isn't just the big cities. That was the case, and you'd always get sort of breakdown of community in big cities, more crime in big cities. Of course, I was just reading the paper this morning, and there's two guys, one from Iraq, one from Iran, who've been running people trafficking organisations out of a hand car wash in Kafili. And you just think, you look at the number of these Turkish barbers everywhere, 16 odd in a town like Devizes or something, and you think this is a huge part of the problem. Like you said, there used to be community, and with community comes this concept of shame and identifying people and ostracising people, whereas now it's all broken down. And I think it's another example of how mass immigration essentially is weakening our resolve, weakening integration, and all of these things, whether it's healthcare, whether it's crime, it all goes wrong. Mike Neville, thank you ever so much. Listen, what are your thoughts on all of this? Do let me know. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. And don't you worry, no daylight robbery here, because those calls are charged at your normal rate, as are text messages. That's your standard rate too. And that can be achieved by typing the number 87222 into your phone. But you do need to write the word talk before your message if it's going to find its way here into the studio. You can also WhatsApp me on 03444 99 1000. And we're on X at Talk TV, and we want to hear from you because it's your opportunity to throw in your 2 bits after this break.
Growth efforts. Yeah, hello. So the government are apparently disappointed. With the economy's growth efforts. Yeah, you're not the only people disappointed. And how they expected the economy to grow with Rachel Thieves's budget, which was everything other than growth. You can't tax your way into growth, people. This is economics 101. If Reeves knew anything about economics, she'd know that, but she just knows about customer complaints, and I think she's probably going to get quite a lot of those. So they just said they're frustrated with it. Yeah, so are we. And then there's more net zero nonsense where apparently we're going to have to pay more for our groceries because they're going to whack on more tax for packaging purposes. So like everything, whether it's trying to make people choose healthier options so they tax fatty, sugary products more, they never go back to the actual supplier and the manufacturer of these products. Like I keep saying, it must be super easy to design a non-plastic packaging replacement that is like biodegradable. Surely in this day and age. So government should go to the suppliers and the producers and say, we want you to change your packaging from plastic, please. Win-win, everybody. But no, we just tax the customers more because that's going to help the environment. And as I've said before, every scaremongering from acid rain to polar bears to Mauritius, or is it the Maldives, sorry, sinking, or whatever nonsense they come up with, it never comes true. But at the end of their scaremongering campaigns, what happens every time is more control and more tax for the little man. And then, with this fabulous government of gaslighting that we have, Sue Gray is going to get a peerage for her fabulous, hard, amazing efforts, her contribution to the Labour Party. Really? Anyway, happy Monday, people!
App on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, shall we all share in some festive cheer together now? Let's begin that by speaking to Paul, who's in Devon. Hi, Paul.
Yes, good morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, my darling. How is Devon?
Well, it's grey and grim down here. Obviously, not good news for the windmills and the solar panels. Unfortunately, we've got plastered all over the place. But just to talk to you about Mr. Starmer and his promises and what he's doing. Obviously, people say Keir Starmer's broken his promises. Well, basically, all he promised us was change, and that's what we're getting. If you look at what he's up to, in a sense that he is now changing the face of the House of Lords by stuffing it full of his cronies, which I think you'll find that this man is going to actually abolish the House of Lords. And what is he going to replace it with? Well, if we cast our minds back to the year of 2004 and a man named John Prescott, who tried to introduce regional assemblies into this country by amalgamating councils into big unitary authorities, what is Keir Starmer trying to do now? I think that when he says that he will not take us back to the European Union, he's quite correct in saying that. He's going to do it another way. He's going to bring back our regional assemblies, which obviously I think you will recall in 2006 the European Union wanted to break the United Kingdom up into 8 regions.
Yes.
And from that point, these regional assemblies will then be able to do their own deals with the EU. That is how we are going to go back to the European Union. Starmer won't be doing it. And if you think, this man has got our best interests at heart, he's not. He, in the new year, is going to be off on his foreign travels again, and this time you will find he's going to be off to Davos to take his instructions for 2025.
Yeah. Sam, I've got to bring you in on this. This is, again, a topic I wasn't expecting to talk about today, but here we go. Devolution. And they are, of course, talking about creating sort of more metro mayors and mayors of unitary authorities and creating these regions. And I remember, because I was involved in UKIPRI before Brexit Party and before being in the European Parliament myself, it is very much the blueprint of the EU to regionalise everywhere and create this downflow of power, this so-called democracy. And yet it isn't, is it? The problem is when you have this, what you end up with is layers and layers of bureaucracy where I think actually people feel less accountable. If it was me, frankly, I'd get rid of that blimmin' Welsh Assembly. I'd get rid of that nonsense up in Scotland that think, men can go in women's prisons. I'd get rid of that one in Northern Ireland that barely even sits half the time because they can't decide who should have power. It is a nonsense. It's glorified county council stuff. What was wrong with the old model? Devolution, in my mind, costs money. I don't think it actually helps democracy. I think it's the other way around. And, Paul is onto something. This has been the left-wing agenda, the sort of global socialist agenda for a long time now.
But, Alex, you're forgetting the fact that these bodies provide jobs for people in politics. They provide extra money swishing around the Labour Party. Politicians sitting on these bodies paid tens of thousands of pounds, good money, almost as much as MPs. What are they voting on? Pothole strategies. And it's not like they're even making the decisions themselves. No. They're approving these guidelines, these documents that sit above them, taking decisions further and further and further away from local people. Look, I think there is some scope for mayors that are empowered to run towns and cities properly, etc. You see them in the US, of course, genuinely local government, genuine authority.
Yeah.
But we don't have that in this country because they're all subject to rules and guidelines published nationally. And you ask councillors, you ask people that work in local government, have done it for a long time, and they'll say things like, we don't really run it. It's actually run by the officers, which is their term for civil servants. And that's the reality. They keep changing the label on it. They keep coming up with new things for politicians to do. We saw it with police and crime commissioners, famously. We thought, we're going to have US-style sheriffs. And then you ask a PCC, what can you do? Oh, nothing really. You see an appalling case like we saw in Essex with Alison Pearson, who was wrongly given this NCHI. And what do they do? It's very important we follow the guidelines. It's powerful people getting paid in order to tell you that they don't have any power.
It's like, without being too tinfoil hat here, it's a bit like the way they do things in China, which is everyone is only sort of one person away from the Chinese Communist Party if you're not in it yourself somehow, by virtue of having a job which is essentially for the government or connected to the government or commissioned by the government. And this is what alarms me about the direction of travel in the United Kingdom. We're going hell for leather for this stuff. And people are like, isn't it great? No, it's not. These people, like you said, cost a load of money. They're not manufacturing. They're not making things. They're not adding to the economy. Most of the time, time. They haven't got anything to do. So they sit around and come up with diversity stuff or 20-mile-per-hour zones. It's just this layer of stagnant bureaucracy. It is the swamp, and the swamp just keeps getting bigger. Do you know, Paul, can I just say thank you for bringing this topic up, because it's been on my mind for quite a while now, and no one's. It seems a bit weird to say, "I want to, go anti-devolution." That's what people had this debate in fringes, let's say, in Wales about 20 odd years ago, and everyone's gone, "Oh well, we got the Welsh Assembly, that's that then." But like I said, I kind of think this stuff should be brought back to the table, because if we don't address this, the Labour Party in 5 years' time are going to mechanically, architecturally change the shape of how Britain is governed.
Yeah, and look, this isn't in people's interest. The new proposal is to turn basically all of the southern counties into a place under a mayor. There is no time in human history that's happened. Like, the idea that the priorities of people in Thanet in East Kent are exactly the same as those in West Kent are mad, right? We used to organise people around communities, towns that people actually live in. Leftists hate that. They hate natural organisations of different places in different sizes with a hodgepodge. They want to homogenise everything. They want to make everybody just sitting in under one council place, one efficient leader, and then they want to tell that leader, whose job is basically to pretend to the local people that they're in charge, exactly what it is that they're going to be doing for the next 10, 15 years. And when they don't do it, one of their lefty lawyer mates will judicially review the council and say, "Oh no, when you said you wanted to build this new road that would cut driving times by half an hour, actually you didn't properly consider the impact on Greater Crested Newts."
Honestly, it's a hell in a handcart, this strategy. Paul, thank you ever so much. Let's just quickly squeeze in Steve, who's in Bristol. Hi, Steve. How are you doing there?
Hello, Alex. Brilliant job. Lovely show. All I want to get back to is these young kids that hang around shops and burglars and that. I blame the parents, a lot of them.
Yeah.
None of them says thank you. There's no manners. They're rude. And I'll tell you another thing, Alex. If I caught anybody in my house, you take your chances. Simple as that. Where I come from in Bristol, if you didn't behave yourself, you just got filled in by your mother. And you accepted it. None of this wokey. Well, I was going to swear there, but I won't embarrass you. But you know what I'm saying? There's no please, there's no thank you, and there's no respect.
I'm totally with you, Steve. And you know what? Especially when it comes to some of the more extreme crimes, when you've got these little tearaway kids, or just putting it mildly, these monsters, these junior gangsters in their face masks and their hoodies going around on bikes, stealing phones, carrying knives. The police should be they should be going to the parents' house. They should be hauled down to the cop shop. They should face charges, because if you're under the age of 18, you are the responsibility of your parents. And I think it's about time we started getting strict on parents, because far too many don't know where their kids are. They don't know what their kids are doing. They don't care if they're in school, or if they're truanting or stealing or stabbing or making drill music. And it's got to stop. Steve, I think you're absolutely right. Gert Lush, I would say, as a fellow West Country girl. Thank you, my babber. Brilliant point. OK, let's take a short break now. But when I come back, we're going to be talking about all things money, because I'm joined by Georgie Frost, the Times Money Mentors editor-at-large. That was a bit of a mouthful to say. I don't know why, but we're going to see if we can answer all of your festive, fiscal and financial questions after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, probably spent a bob or two, haven't you, this Christmas, haven't we all? Although I kind of feel like it's not as festive as it normally is, and I wonder what that has got to do with the cost of living crisis. Probably quite a lot. We're joined now by Georgie Foster, Times Money Mentors editor at large, but in here in the studio with me. Fantastic. Let's first of all start off with the news out today that all of that growth that we were promised in the snap election, well, it's not happening. In fact, there's probably a bit of a risk that 2025 could see us going in the other direction.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, we knew it wasn't particularly good anyway. Growth was looking anemic, I think is the word, and now figures have been revised by the ONS to show that actually it looks like we have had no growth at all. The standards of living also have sort of flatlined as well, and going into 2025 it looks likely that we could enter recession, which is of course 2 quarters of falling growth, the economy stagnating. So, I mean, look, like I said to you, what's the difference between 0.1% growth and 0 and minus 0.1%? Not a huge amount, but it just doesn't look like a very rosy picture for Labour, who came in and promised us a little bit more than that. Plus, of course, we had the budget. And we've got the CBI saying that businesses are feeling the worst, the most pessimistic they have since the Liz Truss disastrous... We can't even call it a mini-budget, it wasn't a budget.
Where do you point the finger of blame at all of this? Because the Labour Party say, well, look, we've inherited a nightmare. We didn't know how bad things were until we came into power. We've had to make some difficult decisions to patch up big problems, but we don't want to be judged by where we're at right now. Judge us in 5 years' time. Is that a cop-out? Is it fair that they say, well, look, you know, actually investing in infrastructure is vital for growth? Or, you know, are their tax decisions, frankly, foolish, feckless, reckless?
It's a really hard question to answer as to who's to blame. You certainly can't say that the Labour government, who've only been in for about 6 months, are to blame for low growth in this country. Productivity, low growth have been something that we've been fighting with for many, many years. However, there have certainly been things that have happened since Labour came in. The budget, a lot of the decisions that I think will not help the situation. For example, increasing national insurance for businesses will put businesses in quite a difficult situation, particularly those businesses that rely on a lot of staff, services sector, for example, and they're already having huge costs. We've come out the back of, you know, cost of living crisis, which has impacted, you know, all of us, businesses included. It feels like, and this goes to what you're saying there, look, while I have sympathy for Labour coming in, you're looking at me like, no.
No.
In the fact that it's, you know, they haven't had long, to say, judge us in 5 years' time, people are fed up. We are looking around us, we are seeing holes in the road, we are waiting in queues at, you know, hospitals, etc. Things aren't working. And so to say, in another 5 years is not good enough, really. And I think for businesses particularly, if we want to increase growth, you cannot point to many measures that are happening at the moment that would stimulate that growth that's needed to get us back to where we should be for us to start feeling a little bit better.
But one could say that when you look at those things, the holes in the road and, you know, crumbling infrastructure, that the money's got to come from somewhere. And so they've just said, OK, we're just going to do a raid right now. We're going to get that money out now. We're going to fix those things right now.
Yeah. Money has to come from somewhere. There's no... That's obvious. The problem with economics is when you make decisions, or finances, when you make decisions, there are knock-on impacts elsewhere. So, for example, you think, OK, we're going to just take a bit of extra national insurance from businesses. We've got 29 billion extra to spend. OK. However, what are those businesses going to do? They're going to stop spending. They're going to stop paying people money, for example. They're going to stop giving people pay rises. There is a knock-on impact that will have a far wider impact on the economy that we can't even know yet. But the experts, the Bank of England, the CBI, the businesses that have been polled in the CBI research, which are really pessimistic about it, say that some of these decisions, so the minimum wage, net zero targets, which you were talking about earlier, all these extra costs on businesses are going to have a big impact on growth, a big impact on whether people are going to have pay rises, whether they're going to hire people. So then we're going to have a situation with more unemployed people. Where are you going to get the extra benefits that are needed for that? It's something that needs to be looked at holistically, and I feel that this is a bit too disjointed on what is happening at the moment with some of the government decisions. They've come in very quickly. They said we've got problems, we need to face those problems. I would question the speed of some of that. Some of the decisions made in the budget, and this is my personal opinion, were just a little bit soon, a little bit quick, and maybe they should have taken some time just to see how the lay of the land was first, before we start having... because they've managed to really upset quite a lot of people.
The big ticket items of
businesses,
GB
entrepreneurs,
energy,
farmers, all sorts of people have been very disappointed by this, and I think that there is going to be knock-on impacts of every decision that they're making, and a lot of the decisions they're making, for example, the winter fuel allowance, will not bring in as much money as they suggest. So they're talking about net zero targets, for example, this packaging tax, which is supposed to increase our groceries by about £56. We can talk about that in a second. But it's things like that that are just going to add more and more pressure onto people at a time, and they can't afford it.
Talk to us now about the packaging tax. I mean, it's not going to be a huge amount of money added. Some people say this is sort of pettifogging around the edges. Other people might say, well, what's wrong with just having, like you go into your normal grocery store, your greengrocers, and you got vegetables on display. Why when you buy like 4 pairs, like I did the other day, does it come in a sort of, little styrofoam moulded tray with, plastic over it with, if they were UK pairs, like what's going on here? I'm kind of almost for this policy. There
are benefits to this as well. Okay,
God forbid.
So this to give some explanation. So this was an idea first thought up by Michael Gove. Back in the day when I think he was head of DEFRA, they said that they would bring in a packaging charge for businesses, so it would be premised on the sort of packaging you use. So you create plastic, you pay more money for that, less money for paper, etc. But basically councils are paying for the cost of recycling and picking up rubbish, etc., etc. So this would take that away and a charge would be levied on businesses. OK, now whether you agree with net zero policies or not, whether you agree with man-made climate change or whatever, I think we can all agree that there's a lot of packaging and it's messing the streets, etc. So having something that makes businesses look at, how much packaging they're using, whether we can recycle some of this is a good thing. The problem is this policy was shelved by Rishi Sunak last year because it was just too expensive for the consumer. So that £56 is an estimate, the highest estimate, so sort of 28 to 56 extra we put on, because where, of course, are these extra costs going to come from? Well, businesses are going to have to put up prices. They're talking about putting up prices anyway because of, as we said, the national insurance rate rise, the minimum wage, etc. So they're talking about that anyway. So it's going to be borne by us at a time when we've just come through a horrendous cost of living crisis. Food is like 25% more expensive now than it was before COVID. This is a lot more money that we're paying that people can't afford. However, Labour is saying that money will go into recycling investment, it will go into jobs, etc. Let's hope that's the case. Let's hope this comes out. But again, it's something that it's coming in January the 1st. I think it will start hitting businesses around August time. Again, there's a lot of costs at the moment that are going to really impact. And this is one of those areas, again, where, for example, you asked the question about pears. Apparently, there's some statistic that a cucumber in plastic lasts about 10 days longer than if it was just kept out in the open. So there's going to be extra food waste if it's not packaged properly. So
how long does it take to eat a cucumber? I could get through one of those in 3 days.
I just leave them in my fridge for months.
Do they go that sort of like wet, that green slime? You pick up the plastic package and there's no structural integrity.
It's like one of those things. And actually, something like 2/3 salads in those bags, while they may last longer, don't get used. They get chucked away.
What, look, I love that we're going down a sort of random tangent here. I love a random tangent.
I'm all for
a random, if you will. I go to a farmer's market. I love that blimmin' farmer's market. And everything's British. You can't even, it's in London, you can't even sell anything there. So you can't get avocados or anything there, unless it's grown in Britain. Even when people come over, there's a little French place that makes crepes. OK, so it's a crepe, but every single ingredient has to be from British farmers. So you go there, and I have my sort of big Hessian sack, and I pick my own fruits and put it in the sack. They don't even put them in bags. They weigh them then and there. And I find when I buy salad, which is grown in Pershore near Evesham from this farmer's market, it lasts about 1,000 years. The supermarket stuff goes brown at the edges and has that dubious wet on it within seconds. And I just wish people could be re-educated in home economics. I'll buy something, I'll do my little weekly shop. It costs a lot more because it's from the farmer's market. But you buy less, you use it all. It's far better, helps the farmers. No plastic packaging. I've got a halo around my head in time for Christmas. Why can't people just do that?
And you don't have soggy cucumbers in the bottom of your fridge. Nothing worse.
Cucumbers.
But, you know, you think about all these, as you said, the importing and coming over. Yes, there's the climate issue as well, but also there's time. The time that you don't have to spend when you go to the farmer's market, because they're picking that fresh. So that's why it stays fresher for longer, because it hasn't gone all the way on the flight or wherever it goes, all the way over here. Yeah. I don't know how you get tomatoes over from Spain, but I'm sure it's some sort of way that takes a long time. So, yes, being more mindful about the way that we shop is certainly... And I do think, look, there are measures. I go into a supermarket now and I don't see many of those packages. Remember, they used to package everything.
Tell you what, shouldn't name names, but M&S, you can't buy anything without it being sort of mummified in some sort of vinyl. It's like, honestly, the whole lot of it is just like, you know, you want to buy an apple, oh, you know, 5 years later, you've unwrapped it like it's Christmas every day. Georgie, thank you ever so much. It's been why is this the first time you've come on my show?
I really
enjoyed
don't know.
That chit-chat.
Thank you very much.
Right,
I
more
did
with
too.
us in 2025, please. OK, now, tell me how you buy your food. No, you don't have to. You can talk about whatever you like, because after the break, it's your opportunity to get in touch. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. Standard network rate and all the rest of it. You can use that on WhatsApp to leave me a voice note even. I haven't played any of those yet. Let's get some of those out if we can. If they're clean, keep them decent. 8722 is the number for text message. Put the word talk before you text. And we're on X at Talk TV. I'm back just after this.